In the annals of history, a chapter stands engraved in the hearts of every Indian, a story of anguish, oppression, and resilience during the era of British colonial rule. For over 2 centuries, the British Empire cast its shadow on the Indian subcontinent, leaving a trail of devastating atrocities that continue to evoke profound emotions in the hearts of millions. The arrival of the British East India Company in the 17th century marked the beginning of a new chapter in India's history, a chapter filled with plunder, exploitation, and inhumanity. Initially, under the pretext of trade, the British gradually consolidated their power, entangling the rich tapestry of Indian culture and heritage within the iron grip of colonial rule. As British dominion expanded, so did the desire for profit, leading to a rapacious extraction of India's wealth. The infamous Bengal Famine of 1770, triggered by the company's policies, resulted in the deaths of millions, as rice fields were transformed into indigo plantations, depriving local communities of their sustenance. The callous nature of the British colonial administration further manifested itself in the exploitative land revenue system. Peasants were burdened with exorbitant taxes, pushing them to the brink of destitution and famine. The very land that had once thrived with prosperity now lay desolate, a painful testament to the insatiable greed of the colonizers. Perhaps the most heart-wrenching aspect of British colonial rule was the dehumanization and cultural erasure inflicted upon the Indian people. The doctrine of lapse, introduced by Lord Dalhousie, allowed the British to annex princely states upon the absence of a male heir, depriving rightful heirs of their birthright and autonomy. In a bid to exert control and undermine Indian traditions, the British dismantled the long-established educational system. Ancient centers of learning were shuttered, and traditional knowledge was discarded as inferior to British values. The Indian education system was reshaped to serve colonial interests, perpetuating a cycle of subjugation through ignorance. The soul of India's culture and spirituality bore the brunt of British oppression. Temples and mosques were desecrated, precious artifacts looted, and sacred scriptures disregarded. The reverence Indians held for their faith and heritage was met with disdain, as the British sought to replace it with a veneer of superiority. In the darkest corner of this turbulent history lies the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. In 1919, General Dyer ordered his troops to open fire on unarmed Indian civilians gathered peacefully in Jallianwala Bagh, Amritsar. Hundreds lost their lives, and the cries of anguish echoed through the nation, igniting a fire of resistance that would eventually lead to India's fight for independence. Yet, amidst the pain and suffering, the spirit of the Indian people remained unbroken. From every corner of the nation, voices of dissent emerged, shaping a collective resolve to reclaim freedom and dignity. Visionaries like Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and countless others stood at the forefront, leading a nonviolent movement that resonated with the hearts of millions. The Indian struggle for independence culminated in 1947, as India finally broke free from the chains of British colonialism. The journey to independence was fraught with sacrifice, courage, and a resilience that defied all odds. Today, as Indians look back at their history, they draw strength from the trials endured by their ancestors, acknowledging the scars while cherishing the indomitable spirit that prevailed. The atrocities of British colonial rule are etched in the collective memory of every Indian, a reminder of the unwavering determination that defines the nation. As we recount this emotional chapter of history, let us never forget the sacrifices made by our forefathers, for it is through their struggle that the flame of freedom burns brightly in our hearts. As we forge ahead, let us honor the legacy of our past by striving for a compassionate and united India, a nation that embraces diversity, cherishes its heritage, and stands tall as a beacon of hope and inspiration for generations to come. The spirit of resilience that carried our ancestors through the darkest of times will forever guide us on this journey of progress and self-discovery.